guys, welcome back to the Discipline Life Podcast, the place where we talk all about power differential relationships and domestic discipline. I'm Arya, and this is my husband, Coda.
Hello, everyone.
And on today's podcast, we are going to be talking about submission, but more about how a husband can support his wife in the expression of her submission.
And when we say support, we mean motivate?
Inspire. I've read the concept of inspired
motivation was the wrong
submission as a thing. But really it's just about how can a husband create an environment for his wife to be able to express her submission, more or less give her space to be submissive in a way that makes sense in their relationship before you even get to the domestic discipline side of the relationship. Because at the end of the day, domestic discipline is a small part of our relationship. And, you know, we talk a lot about the discipline side. We talk a lot about the dynamics and all of that. But these are relationships, and they're fully formed, fully functioning relationships between couples. And the domestic discipline is just one little sliver of that, where our day-to-day lives is more about connection, communication, enjoying each other's company, having, you know, hobbies and meals. And the domestic discipline is not a focal point of our relationship most of the time. It's kind of like a little bit of like in the background to support what we're doing. So how, given that domestic discipline, the punishment side of that is kind of in the background, how do we function in our relationship as a leader, husband, head of household, and a submissive wife? How do we come together and show that and express that in our day-to-day lives when we're not in those domestic discipline dynamic moments? When
the fear of punishment isn't looming? Is that that's what I thought of just a moment ago.
Well, I mean, not going to lie. I mean, the fear of punishment is there as a motivation.
Right.
It's there as a learning tool, but really that can't necessarily, because I kind of feel like if I was in this headspace where I was always considering everything I did as, am I going to be punished for this? Is this acceptable? If that was my thought process all the time, and I had that fear of punishment all the time, that's not a healthy relationship.
Yeah, I would say that's true.
I really shouldn't be questioning every single move I make through the day.
I hope not.
But there are definitely things that we can do in our relationship that you kind of can set me up in to create an environment where I naturally respond to you in a submissive way without necessarily the fear of punishment looming.
Or even, would you even go as far as saying, you know, there are things that you can do in the relationship that are even outside of the quote-unquote rules, if you will, or...
What do you mean by rule? Like going outside the rules?
Going outside the rules, you know, because some people would say, oh, I'm supporting my spouse because I'm holding her accountable to the rules. And so what you're saying is that there are things that we're trying to think outside of that right now that can support the wife in wanting to be submissive,
right? Because
outside of that box there.
Accountability and checking in and knowing that you are, you know, looking into, like, you're looking into my schedule, you're looking into my tasks to make sure that I'm doing the things that we have agreed that I would do to support my own personal growth, to support our relationship, to support our household. You're looking into all of that. You're going to hold me accountable. But at the end of the day, submission is a double-edged sword, right?
Yeah, right.
And on one side is my choice to submit, and on the other side is my response to
Right.
submit.
To submit, right.
And I always have the choice, but if you're not giving me an environment that creates a natural submissive response in me, it makes the choice harder, right?
Right. Right.
So, I kind of equate it to like anything in life, when you're setting up a new habit. Take, for instance, when you're deciding that you're going to start going to the gym. Most people that do not go to the gym regularly think of going to the gym as an activity that they really don't want to do, right?
That sounds like me. No.
And so there's only so far sheer willpower will take you before you completely give up, right?
Right.
You have to start seeing some positive effects of what you're doing. And even if you're, for going to the gym, you feel better. Maybe you're, there's all these positive effects that happen even
from you going to the gym.
Going to the gym. And so you start to create a positive association with that thing that you really don't want to do.
Right.
But if you didn't have any positive association,
it'd be hard to continue to go
eventually
and do that.
Eventually you'd be tempted to give up.
Yes. Yeah.
Because sheer willpower can only get you so far. And I would say that take that concept into submission. My sheer willpower to submit to you, my choice to submit to you, can only take me so far until I have to have that motivation of to an extent, what am I getting out of what am I getting out of my submission to you? Because as much as we don't want to think of relationships as transactional, every single relationship we have is somewhat transactional.
You're right in some ways. Yeah.
In some ways. And I'm not saying that you should view it completely transactional, because that would be wrong. That would be, if my only motivation is what I'm getting from you, that's not good either.
Well, no, now you're
balance.
using in a relationship like that, you're using the other person, right, to get what you want.
It has to be balanced. So just like, I can't always be giving.
Right.
You can't always be receiving. It's a give and take on both sides.
True, yeah.
Out of a desire to see the other person grow, to see the other person happy, to see the other person enjoying the relationship, and that is love, right?
Yes.
It's giving of yourself in ways that feel sacrificial to the benefit of the other person, and then being able to receive from the other person.
I would even go as far as saying, love is doing those things whether you receive something back from that other person or not. But obviously you want to receive something back from the other person, because that's what makes relationships good or bad.
Because if you're never receiving, and this goes for men and women, if you're never receiving, you will get burnt out.
Oh, yeah.
You will lose motivation. You may lose your willingness to be in the relationship.
Yeah.
And yes, at the end of the day, you can still make that choice. I've heard, love is a choice, love is a commitment. Don't base it on feelings. But at the end of the day, if you're miserable because you are always giving, you're never receiving, that is dysfunctional.
Yeah.
And it's natural to not want to do that anymore.
Well, yeah, and I was going to say, I think sometimes, and this is difficult, I fall into this category a lot, because we live in a world that is so charged with feelings and reacting to other people's feelings on certain subjects. We almost go the other extreme and think feelings are wrong, but they're not. They are an important part. Everything is just about balancing that out. So you're right. Like, the point is not to just not have any feelings at all on the subject, because that makes things that makes your relationship very cold,
Right. Right. I mean,
on that.
you don't want to be completely void of feelings, but you
Yeah.
don't want to be completely void of logic and reasoning either.
That's correct, because then that's where relationships too can really have a problem, be toxic, especially if you have somebody that's always basing everything they do on how they feel. In fact, I was just reading the other day. This is very sad. If I can chase a bunny, real quick, but I promise I think it relates, about how a lot of the divorce rate that's happened recently is because people are saying, "Oh, I just don't feel." Like on both sides, I just don't feel X, Y, and Z for this person anymore. I just don't feel like I'm getting what I need out of the relationship. I just don't feel. And I was like, wow, that's a perfect example right there of when there's too much feeling based in the relationship.
And just to, like, I would never advocate someone stay in a relationship that they are truly miserable.
Oh, no, and that's not what I'm saying,
yeah,
to advocate at all.
But definitely, like, marriage is a commitment. That's the way we view it. And if things are not going right, you try to fix it first.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. Like, I don't
can.
want anybody listening like that potentially has gone through a divorce, or you're on another relationship. But if a relationship failed, like,
there
I'm pointing the finger.
Reasons for that.
There are
to
legitimate
happen.
reasons, but really, what we're trying to do is in what you were talking about is really think about in your relationship if there's something out of balance. Is something? Are you allowing your feelings to govern too much? Are you allowing logic to govern too much? And find the balance there where your head and your heart can both have equal say here.
And I would say that on the submissive side, the pitfalls of submission and of this give and take, this balance, is I tend to, and I think a lot of submissive women tend to, be very nurturing, be very caretaking. And so I tend to give to my own detriment.
Right, yeah, right.
I serve and I give, and almost to the point where I'm not nourishing myself. I'm not taking care of my own even basic needs.
Right.
Because I am more concerned with giving into my family and my relationship with you as my husband. And I think that, and correct me if I'm wrong, but from the outside perspective, I think the pitfall of a leader husband is the idea that his leadership, his provision, his guidance is what he gives, and he doesn't understand how to really support and provide the emotional needs of his wife.
I would say, especially because as a guy, it's not that we never need to be supported emotionally that way, but not as much as women, I don't think. And so it is definitely difficult for me sometimes to realize I need to go a little bit further. Yeah, it's not just enough to just, well, I checked all the boxes. What's the problem?
And And these are very broad general terms. These are to our own experiences, but these things exist on a spectrum.
Yes. Oh,
and
absolutely.
so there's some guys that are very in tune to the emotional needs.
Absolutely.
And then there's some that are very tone deaf to those emotional needs, and everywhere in between. Just like there's some submissive wives that maybe they don't struggle with putting their needs first. In fact,
Right.
it's the opposite, where maybe they struggle with thinking outside themselves. And it's a spectrum with everything in between there
Right.
too.
Yeah. In fact, I would say for me, I'm getting better, but I still think I'm 60-40, more on the side of I still have a long way to go in terms of realizing, okay, I checked all the boxes, why aren't you happy, kind of thing, versus you need to, making sure that a lot more your emotional needs are being met as opposed to just your physical needs and, your, what would they call that? Is it monetary needs or food, clothing, shelter, things like that?
Okay, I was like provision.
Provision, thank you. That's the word I was looking for. Because a lot of times, that's the case where it's like, well, I provided the house and the food and the and the clothes and all that kind of stuff, and I did X, Y, and Z, but there was no emotional support there that was being offered.
I was going to bring that up later, but let's go ahead and chase that little rabbit hole that you started.
Okay.
With provision, because I think I do think that as the leader of the home, it's your responsibility to lead, to guide, to set goals, and to provide. But that doesn't mean, because I think that so many times people look at like, oh, the man is supposed to be the provider.
Right.
And they think of, money, food, shelter, all of those things. But that's only one part of providing.
Yes, right.
Because there are situations where a man can't work.
Correct, right, sure.
Or he can't, and especially in today's economy, he can't be the sole income earner.
Right.
Does that make those men less leaders in their home?
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Right, I know what you're saying. Right.
They are still very much the leaders of their home.
Correct,
They are
right.
still the heads of household, even if their wife is working, even if she is the sole income provider because of a disability or something else.
Or maybe they've just decided for him to stay. I mean, I don't know.
I was about to say there's so many family structures and
right. That's what I was going to say. I'm
that's
not sure.
Really between a couple. Now, I think that if a man's able to work, it is in his best interest to do so.
Sure.
That's my personal belief, but it really comes down to what works best for the couple and what they've decided, right?
Right.
And so that provision aspect doesn't just mean monetary, physical provision. It means providing emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, creating an atmosphere of friendship between him and his wife.
Wait, a husband and wife can be friends?
And just that closeness, right?
Yeah, you're right. Exactly.
Because yes, it is a friendship, but I've also read some stuff online about like in domestic discipline, should a husband and wife be friends, and not in the same way that you're friends with your buddies. Right. But it is a different relationship, and it is a relationship that should be honored as being differential.
Absolutely. I mean, we have said this many times in our relationship that, and this is just my belief, because you're my wife, nobody should know me more or better than you, even some of my buddies. I think you should know me the most. There's an intimate
closeness that is a benefit of marriage.
Yes, exactly. That's a great way to say it. Right, exactly, on both sides. And that is really, really important in order to succeed in every aspect of your relationship. And so, yeah, if I'm talking to either side, you have a friend that you think possibly knows more about you or something than your wife or your husband, you should probably fix that, because I think that could be an issue in the relationship, and that's definitely something that we've worked on to try to cultivate in our relationship, is that no one in our friend circles, nobody knows the other person better than I know you and you know me.
Yep.
You know all my she knows all my deep dark secrets, but
so that's all I really wanted to point out about the word provision, is that we're not just talking about the physical side of provision, because a man who, has a working wife, like, he can still and he should still be the leader over her and hold her accountable. And if they are in a domestic discipline relationship, he still has all of that leadership towards her.
Yes.
And that doesn't, just because she's working outside the home, doesn't negate her submission.
That's what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly.
But really, how can you as a husband set me up for success in my submission? How can you create an atmosphere of submission in our home, or an atmosphere within our home that allows me to
want to submit,
to want to submit, to naturally submit, to feel free? Because for myself, and I think that this is common among people in general, but especially women, is there is a level of anxiety and hypervigilance that tends to be present within women. Not always clinical,
Right.
not always a problem, but it seems like that seems to be a more common experience among women to kind of have that. And so in order for a woman to feel like she can submit, she needs to have a certain level of security within the relationship and within the home to be able to do that.
Right.
And so how do you go about setting up our home in a way that creates that environment of security, that creates that environment of just being able to naturally submit without the worry of things falling apart?
Well, I mean, I think you kind of stole my first one, but that's good. I know in our relationship you really value security. That's something that's very, very important to you. So I try to do everything that I can to make you feel secure. So one of those things is obviously I want you to have a home that you like and feel safe in, that you are able to cultivate as yours. As silly as it sounds, I think that you being able to decorate the home the way you want and all these different kinds of things provides the security. If and this is going to sound funny, if security systems are needed, put those in. But more.
Oh, go ahead.
And so that would say from a more of a physical or tangible thing, in terms of an emotional security. And this is going to sound funny. Is one of the reasons that I try to stay fit is not only for my health, but also because I want you, and this is, and I want to be very, very clear about this because this can get people upset really, really quick. I am not saying that you have to look like Thor or anything like that, but what I'm saying is for Arya and I's dynamic, I try to make sure that I'm staying healthy and all those things because I want her perceive me as strong. And that's going to look different in everybody's relationship. But I want her to physically perceive me as strong and healthy because I don't think she would say this is a huge part of our relationship, but I want you to have security in knowing, hey, he's going to be able to run down the bad guy, if you will, or whatever. And then in order to also help you feel secure, the last part is I'm getting better at this. I was really bad, I think, at the beginning of our relationship, and I still haven't learned it all. But figuring out how to be there in the emotional moments that you need me in, whatever those are. Maybe it was a stressful day with our daughter, and you really need me to help you emotionally feel better and feel secure in that because that relationship is unstable. Or whatever happened during the day to make you feel insecure, I need to do a better job. I need to do a good job of giving you whatever it is that you need in order to feel like, okay, no matter what happened today, he's got me, he's caught me. These words that we use, and I even though it was chaos, he's home. I feel secure. I feel like the dust is going to settle now that he's home. And so I think all of these aspects are important. That especially that last one. But you would be surprised, I think, of how many women don't even think about just the fact that some of the first things I named with security systems and things like that actually do play a role in them feeling secure, which is why I felt the need to kind of bring that up.
And I think when I talk about security, because you talked a lot about the physical security, which is important, and those definitely play into it, but also emotional security.
Well, I think that's what I was saying at the end, right? Is the emotional.
Yes, but even
aspect of
to
it.
play further into that, do you want to know what
Yeah, I think you should talk about that.
what the things that you do that you may not even realize support that process?
This is good because, again, everybody will kind of hear this as I'm hearing it on the podcast.
So the ways you create an emotionally secure environment in our home is you are genuinely happy to see me when you come home at the end of the day. I have very rarely, if ever, felt like you were not looking forward to seeing me at the end of the day.
Good.
That makes me feel like you enjoy being around me, and that creates an atmosphere of emotional security where you're happy to see me. I can then be happy to see you.
Me, right.
Because I am already, but as a woman, as someone who kind of takes my emotional cues from the people around me, if you walk in the door and you don't seem happy to see me, it's more my initial response is more to retreat and back off. But when you're happy to see me, I can take that as an emotional cue to also reciprocate that and to, lean into our dynamic, right?
There, yeah.
And also, you prioritize spending time with me. So you are very busy. You have a lot going on in your life, but you prioritize spending time with me. And that gives me a level of emotional security. Because it's not uncommon to hear women complain that their husband plays video games or, even the common, like, he goes to the bathroom when he gets home from work and he's in there for an hour. I don't.
What are you doing in there?
And even men who, they're just going to work, coming home, they don't have all of these extra obligations that you have right now. They don't prioritize that time with their families. Yeah. They really want that time to themselves. And there's nothing wrong with having downtime, with having time to yourself, with having your own hobbies or interests. Even Coda, he's really he's a guy that really likes to watch movies. I don't like to sit and watch
I am a movies guy, yeah.
Yeah, and so you will, at the end of the night, after we've spent our time together, we will both take time to ourselves to kind of do our own thing for an hour.
I always need about anywhere between 30 to 45 minutes just to wind down before bed. And so, I'll watch 30 to 45 minutes of a movie. It's kind of funny. A lot of times it'll take, 3 days for me to watch an entire movie because I just watch it in pieces. And but so that's how I wind down.
All that to say, it's not bad to have time to yourself and to have that downtime. Some guys need that when they first come home to transition between work and home. And that's just a communication thing.
Yeah.
But I know that you, even though you need that downtime and you like having that downtime, you prioritize spending time with me, with our daughter, and you prioritize our relationship in that way.
I hope that I've given that impression, that's for sure.
And because you do that, then I can then prioritize our relationship. And for me, that is expressing my submission in a tangible way. That's how I express that our relationship is a priority.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it's a give and take. So if I wasn't prioritizing our relationship, if I wasn't prioritizing spending time with you, if I wasn't happy to see you, then you would be less inclined to do that for me.
It would make it tougher. Yeah.
And so it is a give and take. So I'm not saying I'm only doing this because you first. No, it's kind of like a circular pattern.
Yeah.
And it's always flowing, right? So I give you and I receive, and it's kind of this ever-flowing energy between us.
Yeah, and I think it's also important, this is where it goes back to the communication that, there have been days where I've had a tough day, and I come home and I immediately know that I don't mean to, but I'm giving off the vibe that I'm not happy to see you. And there have been times, like you probably recall, where I had to stop and say, hey, I want you to know This is in no way me expressing that I'm not happy to see you. I am actually happy to be home. I'm happy that you're here. I've just had a really tough day, and it may be radiating off of me, this negativity that I don't mean to radiate off of me, but I am happy to see you. I am happy to be home. This is a place where I feel have safety and solace and solitude and all of these kind of things.
And I heard someone talk about, and I don't think it's a perfect analogy, but they were talking about how relationships can never be 50-50 because,
Right.
not each person is not going to be able to give their half every single day. And what her and her husband would do is, he would get home and he would say, I only have 40% today. And she would say, that's okay. I can make up the 60. And I think it was more about emotional effort, not leadership, not submission, not all that, but like emotional effort. And she's like, but if we both had a day where we were both at 20%, then we had strategies to work through that. I think that's
really good.
What I like about that is I like the fact that they were communicating about it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that they were working together to have strategies to allow each other to be able to say, I've got nothing to give today.
Yeah, and I think that's really important because sometimes you're not going to, depending on the day either of you have had. And there are going to be days where both of you have had a day and you show up and you're like, look, both of us are on empty here.
Right. And so I do like that aspect of it. I don't think it's a perfect analogy, but it works for that part.
Yeah, I think that's actually really
absolutely. Another thing that you do that really helps me feel in my submission and be able to naturally respond to you, and you don't do this perfectly.
I would say that I do nothing perfectly, so that's okay.
But many times, and I would like it to be every time, but many times when you walk by me and I am, maybe I'm in the kitchen doing something, or I just, and you walk by, you physically engage me in some way. You touch me. Now, this comes back to, the love languages. And we briefly mentioned that in a past podcast. And if you remember, I said I wasn't a huge fan of the love languages.
Neither am I.
The only reason I'm not is because I think that it's very limiting to put yourself into categories when in reality...
When you could be a combination of many of them.
Well, in reality, most people would appreciate expressions of love in most all categories.
Right.
At different times. And because we're ever evolving as people, you may switch categories, but if you put yourself in this box and in this category, you don't really consider that you might switch preferences,
Right.
But if you do remember, I mentioned that one of my main needs in my relationship is that physical touch aspect. Mm-hmm. So when you walk by me and you just engage me physically in some way, it could be just hugging me from behind. It could be giving me a hug. It could be touching my shoulder or just putting your hand around my waist. That really does create just a connection.
Yeah.
It creates this, I see you, I acknowledge you, I love you, and I want to engage with you.
Right. Right.
And it's brief. Right. Because I don't stop what I'm doing 9 times out of 10.
No, in fact, I think a lot of those times when that's happening, you're like making dinner, so you're kind of knee deep in something.
Right. I don't stop what I'm doing. You don't necessarily stop what you're doing. It takes about, 15 to 30 seconds for you to create that connection. But that ongoing connection to say we're in the same space and I'm acknowledging that and I'm acknowledging you and I'm creating this connection, that means so much to me.
Yeah.
To then be able to give back to you because that fills me in a way to then be able to give back to you in the form of my submission and service.
Yeah, and I like what you mentioned about this percentages earlier because I think the times that I don't do that very well, like you were saying, I'm not perfect at that, and you're absolutely right, I'm not. I've gotten a lot better. But I realized as you were talking about that, I'm like, it's because it's on those days where I don't have a lot. And so it's not a malicious thing, but I just don't think about it because I'm running on low brain power. I'm running on low percentage. And so I'm not doing that very well. And so it'd probably be helpful to communicate in that instance, like, hey, I just want you to know I'm walking in with 40% or whatever. So I want you to know that just in case something that I did yesterday or that I normally do, if it doesn't happen today, I want to immediately let you know why that is. Like, it's not a personal attack. It's not that I'm displeased with you. It's not that I don't like being around you. It's I'm low on the energy factor. And,
the other thing that you do, and you do this actually really well, is you are able to recognize, and I would say you do it well now. I feel like this is something that you have actively tried to get better at within the last 6 months.
I think I know where you're going with this. That's why I laugh, but go ahead.
Is you have become really good at recognizing when I am becoming overwhelmed. Is that where you thought I was going?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you recognize when I'm starting to get overwhelmed. You will then come over to me. Typically, you'll ask if I want a hug because sometimes that
you just want to
overwhelm.
hug it out.
Yeah. And you try, and I know you're doing this, but I love that you do it, so I haven't said anything. But I can tell that when we're hugging, you try to regulate my breathing.
It's the musician in me.
Did you know that you were doing that?
No, it's just
Okay.
instinct. No, it's just an instinct that I have.
And then you see if I need to talk.
Yeah.
You try to figure out, am I overwhelmed for a specific reason?
Right. Because sometimes I've realized that I've overwhelmed you. I didn't mean to. But I realize, oh, geez, I did that, and so I need, or I think I did, and so I want to clarify. Okay, what did I just do, or what did I just say that overwhelmed you? Because I want to be able to take that off of you.
Right, and you want to be able to use that information to approach in the future, so that you don't accidentally cause a stress response. Because that's really what overwhelm is an acute stress response.
Right.
And so you ask, hey, do you need to talk about anything? Is there anything I did? Are you overwhelmed for any particular reason? Sometimes I'm not. Sometimes I'm like, I just feel really overwhelmed right now and I don't know why.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay, that's fine. And you don't push me.
No.
That's another thing that is
I've gotten
very,
better at
very
that
helpful.
where I used to be a little pushy.
Yeah.
Because I'm the kind of guy that if I don't
find the problem and fix it.
Yep, I'm gonna fix it, and I have to learn that, especially my wife, she doesn't always want me to fix it. She just wants me to be
and
present
metaphorically,
and
you were taking a sledgehammer to the drywall of our relationships, trying to find the leaky pipe. And I'm just like, then we're down to studs, and I feel like just emotionally drained because I'm like, I did not want that at all.
I didn't want you to put new sheetrock in tonight. Yeah, exactly.
And so, and if it's, so you recognize when I'm overwhelmed, you do those things to help me kind of calm down in that moment. And then you do try to the best of your ability to see if you can take anything off my plate.
Exactly.
So if it's like, hey, let me cook dinner tonight. That's rare in our house because,
Should just tell you, what I cook that can be edible is,
he went from living with his mother to having a meal plan to being married. So the skills of cooking just weren't there.
And I'm also not like Arya where, correct me if I'm wrong, but you enjoy cooking.
Oh, I love cooking. It's a very creative outlet for me.
I hate it. Like, I absolutely hate it. So that could be part of the problem.
Yeah, you're
too.
very much like cook it till it's edible and then just eat it. And I'm like, we're going to figure out what flavors. It's a creative outlet for me. I love it.
Which is why it's so good, and I enjoy eating things that you make. But that is also, I think, contributes to why.
But sometimes I can be overwhelmed, and that can be too much. And even more likely, you're willing to just let us go get takeout in order to take that off of my plate.
Yeah. Which is why we try to save up save up those moments and those times so that when those do happen, it's not a financial burden and stuff
Right,
either.
because I mean,
I don't want to just tell everybody, hey, if your spouse is overwhelmed, and it's happened every day this week, just go ahead and get takeout for everything.
no, and I mean,
So.
there's certain things that you could do. I mean, you can have emergency meals on hand. There's
Right,
nothing wrong
right.
with frozen pizza and bag salad.
No, nothing wrong with that. No.
We have definitely chosen to go get a rotisserie chicken and a bag salad
Or
instead of takeout.
how many times too have we, when that has happened, you feel overwhelmed? We just like go to the nearest Walmart, grab sandwich meat and
Yeah, so
potato chips.
There's
and,
options to where that doesn't have to be a super
Yeah.
huge financial burden that allow you to kind of take the burden of
whatever's going on. Yeah.
on and lessen it.
Yeah.
There's been times where you're like, hey, I know that you're supposed to get these certain tasks done, but let's not worry about that tonight.
Exactly.
That can wait till tomorrow.
Or there have been times too where I know you're exhausted and I'm just like, look, I think you just need to go lay down for an hour.
Right, and there's nothing wrong with my wife is really overwhelmed. I'm going to just do the dishes for her so that she can.
I didn't do that
take
so
that.
well the last time we had.
But you can do those things. Now, Coda's right. He tends to just say, oh, it can just wait till tomorrow. And he just lets it wait and he doesn't pick up that slack. That's fine too. Like just giving her permission to leave the house a mess and catch up the next day. Or
make sure you talk about these things though first in your relationship, because that's the reason I do that is I know Aria doesn't necessarily mind.
And our situation allows me to do that. Like if we had several small children, I can't exactly wake up to a mess in the morning.
Right. And so that's what I was going to say. That may not be good on your, so you've got to have, again, a lot of communication about that. And you know your spouse the best about whether or not that would be a bad thing or not.
Right.
So if her waking up to having to do the dishes would be a bad thing, then yeah, go ahead and do the dishes. In our relationship, like I said, I should have probably done it the last time this happened, but honestly, I was in a different headspace. I was probably in a 60-40 moment where I only had about 40% to give, and
I think I was at like 20% that day.
And so that was one reason I didn't think of it. But the point is really try to figure out a way how you can. What are those ways that you can help out your spouse when she's in those moments?
And I think actually one thing that just occurred to me as you were talking is because you have created this sense of leadership and strength, I view you as being strong. I view you as being a steadfast leader.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to recognize when you're in those moments of only having 40%, 30%. Because you don't show it.
That's good because that's
but
what
you
I
need
try
to
do.
communicate it.
Right, exactly. And
because
that's
I
what
woke up and I was like, oh, I was really hoping that you would just do the dishes for me. But if you would have told me, hey, I'm feeling pretty exhausted myself. I don't have the emotional or mental bandwidth to give here, but I'm going to give you space to also be tired and to also be emotionally depleted, and we're just going to survive today. Can we just survive today?
Right.
And then I would not have gotten pouty that you didn't do the dishes for me.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. Like, I really liked that that was used about the percentages. I think that's a good thing to start. That's an easy way for me because I love dealing with percentages in that way.
For someone that's not super analytical, you really do like analytics.
Yeah, that's true. Although there would be some that would argue to say that I am kind of analytical. So
perhaps. I don't view you that way, but
the point being that you're right. That's the communication part that you have to talk about is so that when you're in those moments, you're not going, oh, how do we handle this? Talk about it before you get there.
Right. I mean, just the concept of like having a emergency evacuation plan for your home, they always tell you, teach your kids how to leave the house and where
Right.
to go and have a meetup point. And you're supposed to do all that and practice all that before something like a fire happens.
Yeah.
So that when those emergency situations happen, you have the plan and everyone should know what they're doing. Now, I wouldn't say being overwhelmed or being tired is an emergency point in a relationship, but it's definitely something that requires a plan.
Right. Yeah, because sometimes you're going to have to use a sports analogy like I do. Sometimes you have to call an audible. So
I don't even know what that means. I don't even know if most people would know what that means.
It means you have to change the play right before the original play was called because you were thrown something completely out of the ordinary. So
to finish up on my little list of things that you do that really help support me in my submission, the last thing that I wanted to bring up is you are not unreasonable in your expectations for me.
Well, thanks. Sometimes I feel like I'm a little too unrealistic.
I really do think that you are very mindful not to expect more than I can give. And also, you create time within, like, you have high expectations. I think that high expectations are a good thing, but they're not unreasonable expectations.
Right.
And they're tangible. I can accomplish them. And you are mindful to create space for me to be able to take care of myself as well. So, if I want to have some time to put into my own self-care, you make sure that I have time to do that I am not always in the mode of serving, giving,
Yes.
and submitting actively.
Yeah.
Because to an extent, taking care of my physical appearance, taking care of myself, making sure that I am healthy and strong and capable is an act of submission because you enjoy seeing me in that way.
Yes.
You enjoy when my nails are done. You enjoy when I am well groomed. You enjoy when I am energized and when I am doing things to support my energy levels and my physical health.
Well,
You
when
enjoy
when you're doing things that you like too, like
Right,
when
when
you're
I
doing
have-
your art and your baking and your cooking and all.
right
those
when I
things.
have my creative outlets so
Yeah.
that I feel fulfilled
Right.
in my life. You enjoy seeing me that way. And so that is an
Absolutely.
act of submission as well. But you are mindful to give me space to do those things so that I'm not in a so that I'm not at risk of burnout.
Yeah, because I know what it's like, and I think a lot of us do know what it's like to get burned out, and people not acknowledging that you need to be replenished. And so it's really important to me, especially for you, that I give you time for that because they're knowing what it's like to feel burnt out and not having a way out of that and not being able to replenish is not fun. And so I also want to make sure that I am not being that. And I think everybody listening knows exactly what I'm talking about. So
To kind of itemize in a condensed list here, the way you support your wife in being able to freely express her submission is realize that your relationship is a give and take on both sides.
absolutely.
That as a husband, as a leader, you can't always be receiving service and submission without also giving back to her. And the ways you give back to her is you create security, you create connection, and you are reasonable in your expectations, and you create space for her to feel fulfilled in ways that are meaningful to her so that she doesn't get burnt out in the relationship.
Because a burnt out spouse is not fun.
I don't feel submissive when I get burnt out and
I
stressed
know.
because I feel like I am shouldering so much responsibility, it puts me into more of a masculine energy.
Right.
And
I think it does
masculine energy does not submit.
I think it does for most women too, if they were honest.
Yeah.
It puts them in
So-
there, and that's not fun.
Do you have any closing thoughts?
I think you covered it all. I think this was a good podcast.
Well, if you guys want to get bonus content and support us, you are more than welcome to join our Patreon. The link for that is down below, as well as our email and our Instagram handles are in the description box. We'd love to connect with you there. If you are on Patreon, you will get the post show that we're going to do now.
We'll see you in the post show.